first time ever the Touring Car Trophy is the lead championship here at Oulton Park. It encompasses TCR UK. There are 6 cars on track. Henry Neal, the champion of 2019 in TCT, is back, and I tell you what, he looks quick out there on track, but he's not on pole for this first race of the day here from Oulton Park, as I say, for the Touring Car Trophy. Remember, this race also has got TCR UK and the VW Racing Cup as well, so there are a lot of different cars out on track, and Andy's going to go through all of that as usual when we get to the commentary very, very soon. Now, today out on track we're qualifying because it's all in one day here at Oulton Park. We saw Dan Kirby, first time out in a TCT car, and he took pole position. It was a rather strange qualifying, I should say, interrupted somewhat with red flags, a lot of cars going off. It's very damp, like I say, and let's say a few months of people not racing has got them a little bit excited, and anytime you get 2 tyres out on the grass here, you're going to go off into a barrier, a sand trap, or anything else you might find around here at Oulton Park that could get in your way. Now, looking back all the way along there, we're going to have quite a lot of cars on this grid, 6 of them from Touring Car Trophy, and then of course the VW Racing Cup, and those are going to be slightly divided on the grid. They all go at exactly the same time. We're going to see a lot of action, particularly near the end of the race when the Touring Car Trophy cars start to catch the VW Racing cars, and hopefully they have a sort of gentleman's agreement that's going to mean the VWs move out of the way. Now, cars you would have seen over the last few years. I mentioned Henry Neal. He is starting a little bit back for him, 3rd on grid for a Neal. He's starting a little bit back from the lead, Dan Kirby. But Lewis Kent, this is one driver who is really determined to win TCR UK. He's entering into some European rounds and WTCR as well in 2020. So it's very, very exciting for him to see if he can make that step up one more on the podium. 2nd last year to James Serkington. He's hoping to lead the way in TCR UK this year and make the ultimate step for him into WTCR. Now, as we start to see the cars forming, Dan Kirby leading the way. This is a driver we know more as a team principal when it comes to British Touring Car, but he is here leading the way, first time out in a TCR car, and looked pretty fine. And as we glance over to the other side, or a little bit further back there, we can see cars not quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. They're not sure where they're supposed to be forming at the moment. It's like everyone's forgotten the procedure, but they're being led quite beautifully by the marshals. So Dan Kirby leads the way. Lewis Kent 2nd on the grid. Then Darrell Wilson, one guy we know from the number of years here, podiumed last year in 2019. Will he make it up onto the step this time? Who knows? Only time will tell. Tim Docker, he was here 2 years ago. Didn't have a great time, it's fair to say, I think, at Oulton Park 2 years ago. Will he make it further forward this time? Again, time will tell. And making up all of those drivers is Max Hart, his first outing for the young Irishman, 19 years old. He is here looking pretty quick out there, just disrupted by a bit of an error early on in qualifying. So let's see what happens, and over to our race commentator, Andy McEwen.
Thank you very much, Bryn, down there on the grid, ahead of our first Dunlop Touring Car Trophy race of the year. It's always an exciting time, this, and a delayed start to the season as well, of course, meaning that we really don't know what to expect ahead of this season opening of the grid. On your screen now then for our first race of the year, it is Dan Kirby, a remarkable effort that in a very wet qualifying session, his first appearance in the championship, and he sticks the car on pole position alongside Lewis Kent in 2nd. Henry Neal and Darrell Wilson on row number 2. Tim Docker and Max Hart making up that 3rd row of the Dunlop Touring Car Trophy element of the grid. Only one non-TCR car in amongst them, which is of course Henry Neal. In the VW Cup, it's Bradley Kent and Richard Gilbert who share row 1, Josh Coggan and Liam Griffin on the 2nd row ahead of Mark Wakefield and Jeff Alden. Then it's Andy Wilmot and Oliver Brown, Anthony Prendergast and Will Butler, with Kieran Griffin and Paul de Hadre at the back of the grid. Some interesting names there in the VW Racing Cup, which we'll get to in a bit more detail in a moment. So as Bryn was outlining there, the grid looks a little different this year compared to how it has in the past. We obviously have missed the first 4 or 5 months or so of the racing season because of the COVID-19 lockdown, etc., etc. As a result, lots of different championships all want track time at the same event. So to save a bit of space, the decision's been made to run the VW Racing Cup alongside the Dunlop Touring Car Trophy, and it kind of fits because these are more or less all the same kind of 2-litre engine, tin tops, front-wheel drive. Not as quick as the TCR and NGTC cars that race in the Touring Car Trophy, so they are really very much as a separate class, but sharing the track time essentially with our Touring Car Trophy entrants. And that is going to make for some interesting racing, I think, because they're 20-minute races. That means that the front-running TCT cars are definitely going to catch the back of the VW Cup pack at some point, and that should spice things up in the second half of the race, I think, especially in these tricky conditions. It's very wet. There isn't too much standing water on the racing line, but offline it is very, very treacherous indeed. So having to go offline to overtake back markers is an extra challenge that the drivers will have to deal with. But lots of unknowns here. Dan Kirby, a new name to the Touring Car Trophy, but a very, very successful driver in lots of other sort of one-make championships, mainly rear-wheel drive, things like Ginettas and Porsche Carrera Cup that he has had success in, regarded as one of the top amateur drivers in the UK, but here he is ahead of some much more experienced touring car racers, people like Lewis Kent, Henry Neal, Darrell Wilson, who have been racing in front-wheel drive touring cars for a long time now, and Dan Kirby on his first appearance in very tricky conditions managed to put the car on pole. What a good-looking car it is as well. It's being run by the Powermax Racing team, one of the top British Touring Car Championship outfits, and Dan Kirby, who himself is a BTCC team owner for the Trade Price Cars BTCC team, looking like a really strong contender here for the TCR and TCT class honours. In the VW Cup, Bradley Kent has the pole position and had it by quite some way as well. He was 2 seconds, just over 2 seconds actually, quicker than Richard Gilbert, who is in the first of those 2 green Golfs you can see. They look like TCR cars, but they're not. They're built to VW Racing Cup spec. The second of those is Josh Coggan, who was one of our championship contenders in 2019. Then, fourth on the grid in the VWs, Liam Griffin, another driver with BTCC experience from about 9 or 10 years ago or so. He raced in the BTCC immediately after having competed in the VW Racing Cup, but it's been 10 years since he last raced in the championship, and here he is back again in a Scirocco. I believe it's the same car that he competed in 10 years ago, and Liam Griffin straight away on the pace, 4th quickest in qualifying, but it was, as Bryn was mentioning earlier on, a slightly truncated session and definitely a disrupted session. We had 2 red flags, the first of which was because young Irish driver Max Hart, making his first appearance in the Touring Car Trophy, went off up at Lodge Corner and got stuck in the gravel trap and did make some contact with the barriers, but without too much damage being sustained. He therefore starts at the back of the Touring Car Trophy grid. After that red flag was dealt with, they sent them back out. They got another 4 or 5 minutes in, and then another red flag came out. We never actually got to the bottom of what that red flag was for. I think one of the VW Cup cars ended up stopped at the side of the road, and the second red flag brought an early end to the qualifying session. And I know a couple of the drivers have said that that definitely hurt them a little bit. Henry Neal was saying, for example, that he really lost his rhythm in that qualifying session because in the wet it takes you a good few laps to get to grips with the grip levels, where the standing water is, getting yourself a bit of clear track because visibility is difficult in these conditions with the spray. And by the time he'd done that, the red flag had come out, and that very much affected Henry Neal's session, so he tells us anyway. I mean, that is pretty high on the list of racing driver excuses, but I'm inclined to believe him. We know he was a front runner, won the Touring Car Trophy, of course, in 2019. So here we go then, the start of a new season of racing. The cars are lined up on the grid here at Oulton Park. Round number 1 of the Dunlop Touring Car Trophy, incorporating TCR UK and the VW Racing Cup, is about to burst into life. Dan Kirby and last year's runner-up Lewis Kent share the front row. Lights go on, the revs will start to rise. Who will win the race into Old Hall Corner? That could be crucial in these conditions. Getting ready for the lights to go out, which they do now. Good start made by Dan Kirby. Bad start made by Henry Neal as the rush towards the first corner begins. Tim Docker already being overtaken by some of the leading VW contenders. And it is side by side. Lewis Kent looking up the inside of Kirby. Can't get through into Old Hall. And Dan Kirby will lead the field through the first corner. Kent goes second. Right out over the curbs. Henry Neal's even wider. And Darrell Wilson comes through into third place. A brilliant start for Darrell Wilson. The Vauxhall Astra into an early podium position. In the VWs, it looked like Richard Gilbert had got himself ahead of the pole sitter Bradley Kent, interestingly. So a change for the lead, I think, in the VW Racing Cup element of the race. The TCT cars, though, head out of Cascades, and there is Bradley Kent going a bit slowly, actually, out of Cascades. So looks like maybe there's an issue there for our top VW Cup entrant. So Dan Kirby then heads through Island Bend into the Shell hairpin. That was a real spirited effort by Lewis Kent to get the lead away from him at the start, but it didn't quite work. There's Wilson opportunistically slipping into third ahead of Henry Neal. Then it is Max Hart, and there the top two VW Cup entrants, the two green cars, Richard Gilbert and Josh Coggan. There is Bradley Kent. So Bradley Kent, the number 44 car, well down the order. He's down in about 5th place, I think, of the VW Cup runners, and he will not be happy with that because he was considerably closer, quicker than everybody else in qualifying. Not at the moment, though, able to keep that pace up in the race. Right, fight for third place then. Henry Neal in the newly re-liveried, the Halfords liveried Honda Civic, the NGTC car, one of his dad Matt's former BTCC cars. He's got a good exit there from Knickerbrook corner, pulls alongside Darrell Wilson, and he will sweep back through into a podium place over the crest and into Druids Corner. Not a place you see a lot of overtaking in the dry, that, but in the wet, if you get a really good run out of Knickerbrook, get better traction than the other cars, then you should be able to power past on the run up the hill. There is Kent. Now, I'm assuming Dan Kirby is still in the lead, although I haven't seen him for a little while. I think he is still out in front ahead of Lewis Kent. No, I don't think he is, actually. Let's wait. Let's try and get a shot of the leaders here, because I think... No, he is. He's just that far ahead. Dan Kirby has already completed the first... no, Lewis Kent has come through first. So Lewis Kent is in the lead of the race. We have lost Dan Kirby, so he's down to 4th place. So something strange has happened there to Dan Kirby on the opening lap. And he's 5th, in fact. He's behind Max Hart now, so there's, I think, a few dodgy transponders because Max Hart is not being shown as having completed the first lap, but there he is, just ahead of Kirby. But there he is, Dan Kirby then, the man that led at the start of the race, must have gone off the road halfway around the first lap, and he is all the way down into 5th place. So Lewis Kent leads the way. Henry Neal is in 2nd. 3rd place is Darrell Wilson, with Max Hart 4th and Dan Kirby 5th. Richard Gilbert leads in the VWs ahead of Josh Coggan, with Tim Docker between them. And although he's in a VW, he confusingly is not in the VW Cup. That is a TCR VW, so he's running in the Dunlop Touring Car Trophy. So, a topsy-turvy first lap then. The wet conditions already throwing up a few shocks and surprises, but it is Lewis Kent, perhaps unsurprisingly you could say, who has stolen a march on the rest of the field. But this is the first time he's ever raced at Oulton Park in the wet. Didn't get to turn a wheel in real competition here a year ago. He entered the opening rounds at Oulton Park in 2019, but only managed 10 laps in testing before the car broke, and he wasn't able to get out there for the races. So this is a real voyage into the unknown for Lewis Kent. He's doing well at the moment, though, leading the way by over 3 seconds from the 2nd place man, Henry Neal, at the end of the previous lap. Over Clay Hill they go then for the 2nd time of Asking Field, starting to spread out a bit, as you'd kind of expect because of these tricky conditions. It's the visibility more than anything else, really. You can see there's not that much standing water on the road, actually. MSV have done a good job with the drainage of the Oulton Park circuit over recent times, but they are definitely still struggling with a bit of spray, so that is possibly deterring them from getting too close to each other for the time being. But let's watch the lap times with interest then. Lewis Kent comes through the race leader, and Henry Neal is faster, and he's quite a bit faster, 9/10 of a second quicker than the race leader Lewis Kent. So Lewis Kent leads, but by a reduced margin now, 2.3 seconds between Kent and Henry Neal. Darrell Wilson falling back in 3rd now, ahead of Hart and Kirby. Tim Docker is ahead of Richard Gilbert now as well. So we do finally have some separation between the Touring Car Trophy cars and the VW Racing Cup machines. Out of Cascades they go. There is Lewis Kent then, the leader of the race. And Lewis Kent with a new sponsor now, Blockcoin, which we was educating myself and Bryn about earlier on. It's a new form of cryptocurrency, apparently. Can't pretend to fully understand it, but Lewis and the team very happy to have them on board. As Bryn was saying, they help him hopefully race in not not only the TCR Europe Championship but also the WTCR Series at the legendary Nordschleife in Germany a little later in the year. For now, though, he's got an interesting situation on his hands, because you can see looming ever larger behind him is Henry Neal. But Henry Neal is not a TCR car, and whilst everyone is competing for the Touring Car Trophy this year, that's a change from last year. All of the cars, regardless of whether they're TCR or NGTC, are all competing for the same championship, but there is a separate championship specifically for TCR cars, and that kind of is the one that we think Lewis is targeting. So how hard will he want to race Henry here, given the fact it's race one of the season, it's wet, it's slippery, and he's probably going to be happier not getting involved in any shenanigans at this stage of the year. We saw Henry get involved in just those shenanigans a year ago, didn't we, with Ollie Taylor here in Oulton Park. And Lewis, I'm sure, would like to avoid a repeat of that, battling with the Honda driver this time around. So there we've seen the TCT field come through. In the VWs, Gilbert had less than a 1 second advantage over Josh Coggan at the end of the previous lap, with Andy Wilmot into third place, actually. So through go the leading two. Now, where's Darrell Wilson? Darrell Wilson's vanished now, so we've lost the green Astra somewhere. And that is the car that was running in third place. So where has Darrell Wilson gone? Frantically looking at all of the monitors we've got, I can't see a sign of him. So Darrell Wilson has gone a-missing somewhere on the track from a podium place, unfortunately, somewhere on the third lap of the race. There he is in the barriers at Shell, so that's an easy mistake to make. We saw cars going off there last year in the dry. Very easy to lock up those front brakes, and Darrell Wilson has gone straight into the Tech Pro barriers, and that might require a safety car, because that is right in the firing line now should anybody else make a similar mistake. So we'll wait and see whether or not we do get a pause in the proceedings. But Darrell Wilson out of the race, and that promotes Max Hart onto the podium now in his first ever race in a TCR machine. Whilst meanwhile that lead gap continues to come down. A second a lap quicker is Henry Neal than Lewis Kent. The gap is 1.2 seconds now, so by the end of this lap, in fact, forget that, they're close together already, I think, the top two. We're following the leading VWs, but there are the overall race leaders. Henry Neal has caught Lewis Kent, and they are nose to tail now, going through Knickerbrook Corner, so game on. We're not even halfway through the race yet, and Lewis Kent has some serious defending to do if he wants to keep the Touring Car Trophy champion from last year at bay. There is the fight for third as well, an all-Cupra affair between Max Hart and the recovering Dan Kirby. So we've got a couple of little battles starting to spring up now, as well as in the VW Cup, of course, where we've got some close action at the front there between Gilbert, Coggan and Wilmot, I should say, the top three. But here, quite rightly, we're focusing on the overall top two, out of Lodge Corner, through the dip, and back over Deersley once again. They flash past me, and the lap times, I think, are going to suggest that Henry Neal is continuing to close. Yes, the gap down to half a second, but now Henry is getting a face full of spray. His visibility is reduced. He won't be able to fully commit to the lines and the braking points that he was using in previous laps. This is what's going on in the VW Cup rankings. This is fourth place, Liam Griffin, and a real train gathering now. Mark Wakefield behind him, then Jeff Alden, then Bradley Kent. We've got Tony Prendergast in there as well. So a real group of the VW Cup runners are pretty much together. They're going through Lodge Corner and back across the start-finish line. There they go into Old Hall Corner. In the lead of that group, we've had actually a few changes. Liam Griffin, yes, Richard Gilbert still lead, Josh Coggan second, and Liam Griffin and Mark Wakefield have both got past Andy Wilmot. So that's what's changed here. The grey car, I believe, is Andy Wilmot, third in the queue, and he's dropped down now into fifth place in the class. So some changing there in the VW Cup, but I think I just caught a glimpse of the overall leads, and I think there's been a lead change. I think Henry Neal possibly has got himself ahead of Lewis Kent. I just saw in the foreground as they came through the chicane, it looked as though the Honda was ahead. We'll wait and try and pick that up for you in a moment or two. That is third place with Max Hart and Dan Kirby. No change there, but what about the leading two? I think Henry Neal has gone through. Yes, he has. There we go. So Henry Neal has found a way past the Hyundai i30N of Lewis Kent, and Lewis Kent, I think, probably sensibly there, has elected not to fight that one too hard. He's still the lead TCR car, but he has lost the lead of the race outright. Back to the VWs now then, and through comes Liam Griffin in the yellow car, Mark Wakefield there with a new livery on his machine as well. It's always the case at the start of the season. It's a bit of a a struggle to get to grips with everybody's new paint schemes that they're running. It looks as though possibly Richard Gilbert there has dropped back into the pack as well, so there's been lots of shuffling in VW. Every time we take our attention away from the VW Cup, something seems to change, but it's a remarkable return to the championship this for Liam Griffin, as their number 18 is Mark Wakefield behind him, so this is third and fourth now. They are ahead of Andy Wilmot, and then Jeff Alden and Bradley Kent, the pole sitter Bradley Kent there, the orange and white number 44 car, just not able to get off the line well, and that means he's lost track position and he's been mired in the midfield. Right, third place battle then in the Touring Car Trophy, and this is Dan Kirby looking to try and use his experience here to find a way through. He has a lot more experience of racing, not necessarily in front-wheel drive cars, although he has got some front-wheel drive experience from a number of years ago in a Renault Clio. Max Hart, though, comes from single-seaters, and 12 months ago he was racing Formula Fords here at Oulton Park, and now he is in a Cupra TCR. I believe that might be the car, actually, that took James Turkington to the title in 2019, and now it's another Irish driver, Max Hart, who is at the wheel. Max, just 19 years of age, gets very sideways there through his lops, did well to catch that. That was some really, really good car control. Hard to pass through there as well, so I suppose as long as he didn't go off the road, there was no real opportunity for Dan Kirby to come through. But yeah, Max Hart was a finalist in the Motorsport Ireland Young Driver of the Year last year. Also went and raced actually in Malaysia in the Asian Formula 4 Championship and finished on the podium on his debut with absolutely no testing. So there's no doubt about it, Max Hart is a real talent, and he is currently holding on to that third position. So things calming down at the lead. Here though, in the VW Cup, there is still plenty to talk about. That's Jeff Alden in the green Golf, chasing down Andy Wilmot, I believe that is, in car number 21, the grey and yellow VW Scirocco, and Alden's on the grass coming out of Knickerbrook. Did well to gather that together, but look at the speed it loses him up the hill, and Bradley Kent is now closing in to try and take advantage. Oh, so easy to understeer wide there through Knickerbrook corner. The apex is right on top of a little hill, and with these front-wheel drive cars, especially in the wet, you do tend to lose front traction. Let's see what happened to Jeff Alden. The yellow car in the foreground there is Liam Griffin, Mark Wakefield right behind him. And, Liam Griffin is some 5 seconds behind Richard Gilbert and Josh Coggan, the top two. There you can see Josh Coggan, the second of the green Golfs. Then Griffin and Wakefield only 8/10 of a second apart. So this is the fight for third place in the VW Racing Cup. Has been a long-time supporter of the TCR UK and Touring Car Trophy as well. They've been on the support bill on a number of occasions, but now they get to share that headline act. Providing us with lots of close battles, but you know, the wet conditions, they do add an extra dimension to this. It's not as easy to overtake in the wet in some ways unless you can really find the grip, and that's why you see the drivers searching around the track trying to find where the grip is in these wet conditions. If you can find that bit of traction coming off a corner like Cascades, for example, you can gain a good half a second or so down the next straight alone. So they're going to keep yellow flags out at the Shell hairpin for now. So no safety car needed for the Darrell Wilson car that's off the road. And Darrell will be, I'm sure, kicking himself about that, because I was going to say he was confident when we spoke to him before. He's always confident, as Darrell Wilson, but he was especially confident about this race. He seemed to be going well in qualifying. Reckon he could have gone quite a bit quicker as well, probably for the red flags and a bit of traffic. So, yeah, shame to see him in the barriers before the halfway point. Well, we are just flying by, actually. Less than 6 minutes to go. Bradley Kent taking quite an interesting line there out of Knickerbrook, using a lot of the apex curve, kicking up the dirt on the apex. Good battle behind them, actually, isn't there? That's between Tony Prendergast, Kieran Griffin, and the number 34 car, which is right behind them as well. And number 34 is Ollie Brown. Ollie Brown, a new name, I think, to the championship. It's a nice little tussle going on for 9th place in the VW Racing Cup part of the race. There they are, those 3 cars. The white car just at the head of the queue, sliding its way into Lodge Corner. And Liam Griffin holding on to his 3rd place now in the VWs. Turns through Cascades, heads out of Old Hall, back down the avenue with Mark Wakefield another race winner from last year in the championship. Most of the front runners from 2019 sticking around for another year in the VW Cup. So there then is Max Hart, who, I was about to say, seems to have got the better of Dan Kirby, and perhaps that is the case, because Kirby makes the mistake down at the chicane, has to take to the escape road. There's no penalty for that, because it's kind of self-penalising. Look at the time that he lost from his little bit of auto-testing he had to do through the plastic barriers there. And so that just takes the pressure off Max Hart for the time being. Dan Kirby unable to stick with him. Leaders then come through. What's the gap like? Well, 157.29 for Henry Neal, 57.50 for Lewis. At the moment. There's been a bit of a drop of pace over recent laps. They're both, Lewis Kent lapping about 0.7 off his previous best lap time. Henry Neal is lapping about 1.5 seconds slower than he was earlier on. So that tells me one of two things. Either Henry Neal is struggling with tyre wear, or, as is more likely, he's decided to just back off the pace a little bit as he tries to just conserve the tyres more than anything, because the track is drying. It's not raining anymore. It hasn't rained for a while, and whilst we're not going to get a dry line before the end of this race, the wet tyres definitely like the track to be a bit wetter than this, so this will be an interesting dynamic now. Which of those two is conserving their tyres the most? There is still time for this to change, of course, should one of them start to run into tyre difficulties. Back to the VWs meanwhile. These are your top two, the two teammates. It's the two green Golfs of Richard Gilbert and Josh Coggan. Probably would have put your money on Coggan to be the quicker of these two, but Richard Gilbert really making a step up in performance this year, and the two green machines make their way through Old Hall Corner, still separated by just over a second now. It's 1.1 seconds between the two, but it's much the same as it has been for the duration of the race. Back down through Cascades once again, and head along the Lakeside Straight as the third place car there in TCT heads through in the foreground. Max Hart. These two are 5.6 seconds ahead of Liam Griffin now, he's suddenly raced away from Mark Wakefield. Wakefield is now 3.2 seconds back, so third place seems a bit more secure for Liam. But the race lead, perhaps less so, because whilst these two may be teammates, I think they're probably going to be willing to race each other here. I don't imagine there'll be too many team orders here. So if Coggan feels he's quicker than Gilbert, just be able to find a way past. Down the hill they come. You can see visibly how much less standing water there is, how much less spray is being kicked up by the cars. These Dunlop tyres really do a very good job of dispersing the water from the track surface. Why in a way it's not really good for the tyres, because the more water they disperse, the harder they then have to work. If it starts getting dry, there is that danger of overheating. Back to the race leader now though, Henry Neal, 2.1 seconds clear now, so he's taking about 0.3 of a second of a lap out of Lewis Kent. But now look, there is traffic, and he's going to catch the VW Polo ahead of him at the worst possible place. That looks like Will Butler in the number 70 car, and yeah, it's just single file through Britain. You can't get past someone there. Look at the time that lost Henry Neal. Lewis Kent is definitely closer now. Now Will Butler move out of the way of Lewis into the chicane? No, he's going to hold them up both equally, isn't he? He's going to turn into the corner just ahead of Lewis. Henry Neal, there you can see really pulling away again now. Kent in second, Gilbert not in third, sorry, not Gilbert, Will Butler there not in third, but going a lap down, two those around him. Dan Kirby still fourth, and it's a case of what could have been for Dan. Made a really good start, but somewhere around the first lap went off, and we'll try and find out between races what happened to him. Leader though coming through to start what should be the final lap this time. There are 30 seconds left on the clock, and Henry Neal has managed this gap nicely so far. He ended the season in winning form last year at Donington Park, and now here he is at Oulton Park, going just as strongly. He crosses the line onto the final lap. The last lap board is indeed out, and Lewis Kent 2 seconds back, so he gained about well, half a tenth that time around. Lewis is pushing. Look at the way that Lewis's car was sliding around there, going down into Cascade. So Lewis Kent has not given up on this, and that really shouldn't surprise me because Lewis is a real fighter, and both of these two drivers, of course, young up-and-coming stars of touring car racing. They've both got points to prove, and Lewis in particular, having finished runner-up in the championship last year, and his team really felt that he was going to win the championship until it came down to the final round at Donington and things didn't quite go their way. So yeah, Lewis is not one to back out of a fight. If he feels that he's quicker than Henry, he's going to try and keep the pressure on, but 2 seconds is an awfully big margin to be closing here on the final lap. This is the top two in VW Cup then. Richard Gilbert and Josh Coggan, they're about to start their final lap, and their lap times are only about 5 seconds off the pace of the overall race leaders in TCT, so that's pretty impressive considering these cars are not as sophisticated as the NGTC and TCR cars further up the road. Less grip, less power, not such strong brakes, and that all adds up to make quite a big difference. So over the hill they go then, through Druids, the penultimate corner of the final lap of racing. Henry Neal from Lewis Kent, and Henry Neal with the new stealth livery on that Honda Civic Type R NGTC is going to take, it would seem, the first victory of the 2020 Dunlop Touring Car Trophy, and he did it in style from third on the grid. Didn't have the best grid position, but in the wet that doesn't really seem to matter too much. Over the line he comes, he takes the checkered flag, and Henry Neal is your first race winner of the year. Lewis Kent only 2.1 seconds back at the flag, with a bit of a wait now before we get to Max Hart, who looks as though he's going to get on the podium in his first ever race in the championship, which is really impressive. There goes Will Butler a lap down in his VW Cup Polo, and then here is Max Hart, and I can hear the team cheering him on from here in the pit lane. That is a really great performance. Look how far ahead he was in the end of Dan Kirby, who I think rather ran out of tyres by the flag. Now, in the VW Racing Cup, things are a little bit tighter, look, because Josh Coggan is still keeping the pressure on his teammate Richard Gilbert here, and the two of them are absolutely nose to tail now as they head out of Knickerbrook for the final time. 2 more corners to go, only one of which is a legitimate overtaking opportunity, you'd have to say. That's the final turn at Lodge Corner, but they are absolutely together now over the hill into Druids Corner. Oh, but then they drop back a little bit as they go into Druids itself. And through the right hander they go. You can see the way Coggan is using the curb, really pushing hard to try and find a way through at the death, but he's not quite going to get there. It looks as though Richard Gilbert is going to hang on to take the victory in the VW Racing Cup under constant pressure from his teammate. Across the line they go, nose to tail in the end. The gap between them just 0.7 of a second at the flag. Third place, I think, on his return should be Liam Griffin, and that's a really good story. 10 years since he last raced in the championship, and he's straight back on the podium, with Mark Wakefield just about hanging on to 4th place, but only just from Andy Wilmot in 5th, just 4 tenths between them. Then Jeff Alden will be 6th, Bradley Kent 7th. That's a disappointment for the pole sitter. Only just hangs on to that 7th place as well from Ollie Brown in the number 34 car. So, entertaining stuff then in the opening race of the Dunlop Touring Car Trophy and the VW Racing Cup.
Yeah, we've got one more race to go, so let's, you haven't got home yet.
We'll be going for the second one. Obviously, we're getting a load of weight in, which obviously does hurt us quite a bit, but yeah, I'll still be going for it. Whack some new tyres on and defend it.
What was it like out there? Because it doesn't really dry in this sort of condition, does it?
That's the problem. It probably looked a wee bit drier than it is, and you've got puddles dotted around. Obviously, it's been raining pretty savagely all morning. You'll be going through the corner, and then suddenly the rear just decides to just take over on you. But just keep your foot planted, keep the car going forward, and
it looked pretty good. Well done.
Cheers, dude.
Nice one. There you go. Henry Neal, race winner. Let's go and find Lewis Kent all the way over here. A lot of social distancing going on, as you can imagine, and we're trying to keep the distance as well. But Lewis, that was a really strong drive, one you really had to work hard for.
Yeah, we saw Henry coming up behind, and I said to a couple of guys, we had it on the radio, and Lee was like, don't forget he's a TCT, don't do anything silly, if he wants to come past, so just pick up a bit of pace to it, which I did. So yeah, I think it dried out a bit too much, and our fronts went off very quick, but not really happy with the performance, top TCR, so yeah, that's all we can ask for. And again, first round, a lot can happen from now on.
Yeah, I think a younger Lewis Kent, I mean you're still young, but a younger Lewis Kent 2 years ago would have probably thrown that away.
Yeah, young Lewis Kent 2 years ago would have been on the brakes trying to stop him come past and probably chucked it in the gravel with Darrell, but an older, mature Lewis actually used his brain for once. So yeah, no, we're really happy with what the boys have done with the car. Car feels good, just get that little bit of front end more towards the end of the race, and I'm sure we can put a good battle up with Henry in a minute.
He looked great out there, well done.
Thanks very much.
There you go, very, very happy Lewis Kent. Let's march over to the left-hand side now and catch up with Max Hart. Now, Max, let's spin you around so we can see your beautiful car as well in the background, but qualification didn't go well for you at all. You really only got, what, 2 laps in, not even that, and here you are, 3rd place.
Yeah, we got 2 laps in qualifying, so which wasn't good. We knew our pace was all right, like it's not the best, it's my 2nd time ever in the car, so I'm still learning and there's loads to learn, but yeah, P3, I'm happy with that. The lads fixed the car, they did a brilliant job on it, so just thanks to Maximum Motorsport for helping me out fixing the car for the race.
Yeah, it's not bad for a single-seat racing driver, is it really?
No, not bad for the first time at all. Yeah.
You certainly take it.
Yeah.
Eyes to the next race, any thoughts on that one?
I suppose if we can be more consistent. I was a bit nervous on that last corner after qualifying, so that's where I feel like I'm losing time, so if I can improve there, I think that'll help me out a lot and help me catch up to Lewis anyway. So.
Yeah, and out on track as well. I mean, it's a track that, just talking to Henry about this actually, it's a track that doesn't really dry in these conditions. You don't get to see a particular dry line, but are you finding areas out on track where you're having loads of traction and all of a sudden no traction?
Yeah, like exactly, yeah, there's different spots on the track where it is more wet than some other parts, but definitely the first 2 corners, Cascades anyway, seems to be nice and dry there and plenty of grip. You just have to be patient with putting on the power anyway, it just washes out if you're just too aggressive.
No, that was a really impressive 3rd place, well done.
I'm happy with it, cheers, thanks.
There you are, thank you, well done.